Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel. In this short video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous night of the local time. The most important updates are coming from the Azov Sea. According to Ukrainian sources, the armed forces of Ukraine shot down the two Russian planes over the Sea of Azov. It happened an hour and a half ago. According to this report, this post was published somewhere at 10 a.m. of the local time. The A-50 was shot down and the Il-22 was shot down as well. But it was in the air and was trying to get the nearest airfield. That was the piece of news that we received from the Ukrainian sources. Later and during that time, the Russians were trying to deny this piece of news, trying to say that it's too early to make any conclusions, that might be something like military exercises or something like this. But right before we start making this video, we got, let's say, almost like 99% confirmation that those two planes were shot down, but with one important difference. According to the Russian sources, not official, those two planes were shot down as a result of friendly fire. Those planes are very important in the Russian air defense. The A-50 cost around $300 million, and his main purpose is he's like Reconnaissance airplane that can discover the flight of missiles of Ukrainian planes and so on. So for some period of time, the Russians got blind in this area, and they need to do something with this and not to waste their time. Now we are moving to the situation on the ground. We got lots of updates as well. The Russian sources during the previous night published another video of another Iskander strike in the area of in Kharkiv direction on the borderlands. This is another strike. As a result of the strike, probably the Russians managed to destroy another warehouse or ammo depot, or maybe Ukrainian Vampire or Alha artillery system or something like this. But this is not the most important thing, that the strike. The most important is the concentration of Russian fire. If we increase the number of updates since the beginning of January, we see how the Russians are focused exactly in Vovchansk. There might be lots of things why they're doing this. The Russians just trying to destroy Ukrainian forces, or maybe they're doing artillery preparation before further offensive operation. Very difficult to understand, but according to information we have, if you remember, 15th of January is the date when the Russians should have started another offensive operation or massive attack, according at least to Ukrainian sources and Zelensky itself. When talking about Liman, we got some clarifications and details about the battle in front of Terny. Now we got another, let's say, not like confirmation, but some Russian sources are saying that as a result of attack that took place during the previous, during January, the Russians haven't managed to reach these positions, and basically they stopped somewhere along this line, and maybe the territory that is colored by the red, that everything that located to the left of this line is in the gray zone. So we still haven't received 100% confirmation of Russian presence in this area. For now, we're not going to update the map because the source is reliable, but not so reliable as we can expect. So that's why let's wait a little bit for more details about the situation in Terny. Now we are moving to Bakhmut Artyomovsk. The Russians continue their offensive operation, and today we got another video of another Iskander strike somewhere in the vicinity of Konstantinovka. You see, the second Iskander strike just during the previous 24 hours. It's when talking about geolocations. Of course, there are much more strikes, and as a result of another attack, the Ukrainians lost probably some warehouse somewhere on Bakhmut tactical direction. When talking about Bakhmut itself and the clashes around the city, the Ukrainians are saying that a group of 80,000 military personnel is intensifying attacks, advancing near Artyomovsk, trying to push the Ukrainian armed forces in direction of Chasov Yar. This was reported by the press officer of the 26th Artillery Brigade, named after Roman Dashkevich Oleg Kalashnikov. So the Russians are pushing, the Russians are increasing their pressure, and the clashes are very heavy, but still the Ukrainians hold the territory, and still the Ukrainians haven't withdrawn their position, so the clashes are very heavy. On the northern part of Krasnogorovka, we continue receiving more and more strikes with the Ukrainian FPV drones. We see the concentration of fire. There are a significant number of Russian forces concentrated in the vicinity of Krasnogorovka along the railways. The Ukrainians try to do their best to shoot as many as possible Russian armored vehicles, tanks and infantry, and the Russians also reply to the Ukrainians. On this scene we can see another Lancet strike, another use of the worm tactics, and as a result of that strike, the Ukrainians lost another Bradley somewhere onto the north of Berdichi in the vicinity of Novobakhmutovka. So the clashes in this area continues, and they are very heavy. Now we're moving to the south to Donetsk. We have some regular updates, like important updates about the special military operation. The Russians started sending to the front line new artillery system by the name of Koalitsiya SV. You know that the Russian artillery systems are very short range, and basically when talking about the situation on the ground, or either the Russian source and Ukrainians confirmed that Ukrainian artillery system was better or is better because it's like Western artillery system like M777 Howitzer and different types of artillery systems, and basically their range is bigger, is longer than in comparison with the Russian regular artillery systems. And this Koalitsiya SV is the first type of artillery system that range is the same as NATO, let's say, artillery systems, or even more. And as you can see, new batch is going to the front line, and this should change the situation in artillery or counter-artillery duels, and this will allow the Russians to reduce the number of Lancet that are used for counter-artillery duels, because now the Russians don't have possibility to use artillery systems in counter-artillery duels, and they are forced to use Lancet for these purposes. But now they can, now everything can go their own way. Lancet will do their job, and artillery systems will do their own job. This is a very important thing. Furthermore, the Russians reported that they completed and started the Russian, let's say, military facilities, the military sector announced the start of serial production of the Drel cluster glide bomb this year. This is a very important type of weapon and very powerful, and the main purpose of this cluster round is to destroy air defense systems, armored vehicles, raiders, some enemy ground equipment at the range of 30 kilometers and so on. So these cluster rounds main purpose is to destroy fortifications, like something big, something strong, not just infantry and the manpower. When talking about Georgievka, Marinka, the Russians continue their offensive operation, very heavy offensive operation, and to tell the truth, I expect today a lot of updates from the Russian side. On this video, for example, we can see how the Russians were bombing the edge positions or the central part in Georgievka with TOS flamethrower system. And as you can see, according to this video, almost the entire package of bombs or rockets from TOS flamethrower system arrived exactly in the central part. Obviously, if there were Ukrainian soldiers, obviously they couldn't survive after such a heavy fire. And this is like the best moment for the Russians to launch an offensive operation with the purpose to break the Ukrainian defense belt and to capture additional territories in direction of Kurakhova and the western part of Georgievka. So the clashes in this area continues. The Russians meanwhile try to bypass Novomykhailovka from the south and to half encircle further from the north. While the Russian ground forces are doing this, the artillery forces and aviation forces continue bombing Novomykhailovka, trying to pin the Ukrainians down and not to allow them to send some reinforcements and, let's say, to secure the flanks or to counterattack the Russians in their flanks. So the situation in Novomykhailovka is very difficult for the Ukrainians, but stable. Now we are moving to South Donetsk, deeper inside South Donetsk direction, and during the previous days, the Ukrainian sources published significant number of geolocated videos of FPV drone strikes in the village by the name of Petrovskaya. This is it. There are lots of updates, lots of FPV drone strikes against the Russian armored vehicles, trucks, artillery systems, armored vehicles. So lots of videos, you can find them on the map. But you might ask, so what is so important in all this video? And the thing is the concentration of Ukrainian fire. If we increase the number of updates since the beginning of the 1st of January, we can see a certain picture. We see the Ukrainian focus of FPV drone strikes in this area, which confirms some certain Russian concentration of forces exactly in this area. So the Russians have their force, they're concentrating them there. Furthermore, we got since the beginning of January, the Russians renewed their offensive and bombing, let's say, of Ukrainian positions between Novodonetsk and Staromayorsk. The Russians activated their clashes and FPV drone strikes in the vicinity between Shevchenkova and Prichistovka, and we have the clashes to the west of Sladka. So as I understand, this small village by the name of Petrovska, Evgenievska, Konstantinovka is the area of concentration of Russian army that the Russians are planning to use in one of these three directions, either Staromayorska, Prichistovka, Pavlovka, or maybe to the west of Stepnoe. So the Ukrainians managed to discover, as we can see, the Russian forces, and probably South Donetsk direction will soon get new breath from the Russian side, and they will try to do something. Now we are moving to Kherson direction. We also have lots of very interesting details from this territory. The Russians continue their offensive operation in Krynki. Some sources are saying that the Russians managed to establish control over a few more blocks and streets in this area, and according to some mappers, currently the Russians control something like this, so additional control and so on. So the foothold of the Ukrainians is getting less and less, and today we got a very interesting video, or this one. We will not watch this video completely, but you need to pay attention that this is the river, maybe not Dnipro, maybe it's Kazachyo-Lagerska Konka, maybe the difference between the islands, but the most important thing you need to note is the ice. The rivers are covered with ice, maybe not completely, some parts completely are covered with ice, some parts are not, but this situation completely reduced the Ukrainian possibilities for sending and reinforcements. As you can see, the boats can't continue. They're stuck in between the ice in the rivers, and the infantry warehouse supply are getting stuck somewhere along the rivers, and the Ukrainians don't have possibilities to do anything. So according to my understanding, this is the best time for the Russians to complete Krynki foothold once and forever. We'll see whether the Russians are able to do this or not, and time will tell us. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.